In this dashing moment, it is with honor that I warmly welcome you to this site for accepting my humble invitation. On behalf of my chameleon, kindly proceed to attend today's archive, my colleague. It is my delightful pleasure to deliver your seer and inform you of this science session. It's time to emphasize some found principles on forecasting shaking grounds to suspiciously remark, which is a much needed update include physical elucidation to mainstream probability speculations. Put in your head the plane you live on and see its shell. You envision a large-scale crust, I suppose, with a decent amount of faults visible, in between which stones and such can rotate. Now to transform this into math, the formulation has been lovably named the Kosarit continuum approach, which happens to contain endearing tensors to describe deformations from which to deduce stress measures in various forms, obviously. To activate, or reactivate mind you, some fault be a jack, and estimate the characteristic dimension of spinning blocks, apply it into the friction law with tractions added. And what you'll find is that in the case of similar dimensions, divergently great rotational numbers result to indicate apparent energy explosions, which then end up on news channels as a surprise segment. Can we open the box further? I give you affirmation. Sliding is not local and propagates among neighboring faults like dominoes. Or maybe ground vehicles crashing in large traffic mishaps, if you will. See in your skull the interaction of how a cascade triggers in be it a parallel or wedge-like fashion. Look enough and observe it in nature. The interaction mass, with letters denoting some newly introduced material parameters, might read to you how undeformed geological bulk deforms during slips and then, after breaks in the shakes, subsequently recovers some of that excess rotation between fault planes. Which is why it was of dire importance to tell you about rotating stones in the first place. Additionally, the time to elapse before repeated activation relates to the size jack determined in what is found to be a linear fashion. Reason being is that waves will propagate with a fixed velocity, maybe really slow and nearly individual like wolves and comparably solitary organisms. The high school graduate might see this to include sequences in the geometric class, like 27, 9, 3, etc., because the faults display such a pattern with their size. For example, in the Atlantic, call this a sequence. You would think the movement spread orthogonal to planes, and bigger lengths will shake harder, whereas times between larger faults, shaking will mean more waiting to be had. Store in your skull this the one sequence with accuracy. This is possible also in very large scales. Now disperse variance such neatly ordered sequences among faults on the map, since of course, the planet has movements all around, and manually consider all the activity simultaneously. This activity can become similar, maybe like when you walk the same as the person next to you, or try and synchronize your dancing to the living being you rhythmically dance with. That's not really a random process, is it? That's a spike for a myriad of temporally aligned movements. Lo and behold, to find the special moment where stars align, stars in this case being represented by movements induced by each separate instance in the sequences. Such an instance will make headlines happen to share this momentous event, and high school graduate maths has displayed how the forecast is trivial, given you saw the correct things to see when you were in search of previous order and shake logs. Like here, after 2, 4, 8, 16, you are able to tell me 32. Takes a brain, but that summarizes it. The sequence part of dominoes happens when previously mentioned waves make it happen, and you source the majority of these maybe kinky waves as movements originating orthogonally from places where the Earth's large moving undergrounds have their federal border, like California. Also waves travel up and down between the poles, which might have something to do with the daily spinning of the planet. For the sake of this inquiry, doubt not that you can look at such a wave also through epsilons or sigmas, and see it invoke with their arc shakes in different zones. Modular analysis is of recommendation for this topic. Massive stress hint at large event expectations, the magnitude of which is discovered to have an upper limitation. Track normalize the promoting shear stress, and the fault preventing normal stress to find this value. Have fun in the 0.6 to 0.8 playgrounds. Maybe a bit sweeter however in inspecting synchronizations and throwing out probability values of local spikes indicating a critical state. If such a condition happens, that a multiplicity of these are in within hand-holding proximity, I would not be flabbergasted should they shake hands and dance together when highly unstable. Alternatively, maybe also lay probabilistic eyes on the waves for shear traction control. Other moderated field displays could also be pretty cool. Wave and shear traction, and the shaking headline is separated from the random. Additionally, long jack dimensions correlate to the magnitude, induced number of activities observed to be caused by a common wave, and also click-through rate of the vertical report, clear and simple. Alarm shear traction penetrating through a threshold, and there you have a notification, but be sure to skill this in location and time. Finishing this dump argument, let it be known that nature has all the reality actually. while a method commoner can only collect fragments of information, which is also partly why having so many ways of shakes forecasting devised is kind of neat. Encourage you to interpret this as logically backed formulation of Earth's bowel movements, which indeed happen to be symbiotic with empirical evidence, candy for the noggin with lots of luck at the bare minimum still, which would also be impressive if that were the case. Scenarios have plausibility, whilst the prediction would be saying more or less the outcome, majorly different from the forecast present in the discussion. You may though say YOLO and call it a predicted thing, the general audience would never know, as it is widely accepted ones with distinct affinity to philosophy. Having the ability to cook is above in priority, when compared to actual taste of the dish. If you know, you know. So work with the ingredients given in a way which you can and operate differently. If you find the modified execution to be favorable, backed by a big-ass reason system, in summary of your substantiated attention, on thing to debate with yourself in the shower or meticulously articulate while you're trying to fall asleep, might be the fascination inception techniques of waves, whereas some key takeaways which you can introduce to your parents after this lecture, might be select mathematical backgrounds describing the Coseric continuum. I think for all of us, a useful and fun-forward facet of brilliant information to keep as a nugget and hold on to in our future is that hardest shakes are products of the slowest waves and elevated shear traction plus sequences. This in turn is rightfully and successfully a concept, again for this society, a very important one. Maybe this is the first time you heard about this variant of series by Pulgi, but this is what is sometimes going to be locally. This second, have a taste which isn't final. No more.